Dri'An had traced the edges of the known galaxy with more precision than most thought possible. Each star system, every drifting asteroid belt, even the occasional rogue planet, had a place in his sprawling digital atlas. Yet, despite decades of mapping, one region refused to yield its secrets. It was an absence, a void. The cartographers of the galaxy had a name for it: the blank zone. To most, it was merely unmapped space. To Dri'An, it was obsession. The last transmission from the Uric exploratory corps warned him again: do not enter beyond Sector 417Z. Humans, if they still exist, do not welcome outsiders. Their voice was clipped, formal, tinged with fear. The official log labeled it a routine advisory, but the underlying tone of terror was unmistakable. Everyone knew stories, myths passed down from the post-war chronicles, tales of human worlds so far beyond, so unconquerable, that even the most advanced fleets skirted their periphery. Dri'An did not care. He needed answers. Someone had to find out why the map ended there. His ship, the Alarian, hummed with quiet precision. Its engines, silent but potent, carved a path through the drifting debris of the outer sectors. Dri'An's gloved hands danced over the holographic console, tracing lines, recalibrating sensors, and adjusting for the subtle gravitational anomalies the blank zone exuded. It was as if space itself resisted observation. It's like a living entity shivering at the touch of outsiders. Dri'An's obsession wasn't simple curiosity. He felt it deep in his marrow. Humanity's territory, if the legends held any truth, was more than mere political boundaries or military might. It was a testament, a relic of unbroken willpower. Entire fleets had vanished in those regions, their last transmissions garbled, often ending in terrified murmurs. They're still here. It was not just humans who inspired fear. It was the idea of them, the sheer unpredictability of a species no one could contain. He adjusted the Alarian shields as it slipped into a corridor of gravitational eddies, small but turbulent. His navigator, a holographic AI named Vex, flickered. Eyes F, a projection, could be said to have eyes narrowing. Dri'An, the sensors are reporting anomalies in the subspace frequencies. We're approaching regions not recorded in any charted data. Signal interference is rising exponentially. Perfect, he said, his voice flat but tight with excitement. Let's see what hides where no one dares look. For hours, he charted the invisible currents of the void. Silence pressed around him, not empty, but waiting. The kind of silence that made every small sound the hum of the ship, his own breathing feel monumental. The stars outside seemed fewer, colder, more distant, and in the deeper darkness, Kian imagined the weight of centuries pressing on him. He felt the invisible gaze of 100 lost explorers, ghosts of human myths brushing against the edges of perception. Then came the whispers. At first, they were so faint he questioned the integrity of the audio logs. Subtle, high-frequency murmurs, like voices carried on solar winds. Vex detected nothing. Dri'An's pulse quickened. Not interference. Not equipment failure. Something else, he muttered. The whispers weren't words. They were patterns, rhythms, hints of intelligence. His stomach tightened. The stories hadn't lied. Humans, if the legends were accurate, left signals in the void not to communicate, but to warn, or perhaps to invite. He could not tell which. He activated the external sensors, probing deeper into the emptiness. The blank zone stretched before him like an endless black canvas, yet streaks of untraceable energy scrawled across it. They weren't stars. They weren't ships. They were deliberate, almost artistic in their chaos. A map, perhaps, left by a species that refused to be fully mapped. Dri'An's heart thudded against his ribcage. He had crossed the point of no return. No authority would approve. No fleet could follow. And yet he felt a thrill like none before. Discovery, danger, and awe intertwined. Hours all, perhaps, days, Time had become irrelevant. Past. The whispers grew louder, threading themselves into his dreams and thoughts. Dri'An slept fitfully in the Alarian's cryonap chambers, where even rest became a battlefield between his obsession and survival instincts. He dreamed of vast human cities that floated on planets with impossibly large rings, of warriors who fought with strategy rather than technology, and of children who could dismantle an alien fleet with nothing but cleverness and intuition. Even in dreams, he felt the humans' defiance, a quiet laughter at the hubris of anyone attempting to conquer or chart them. When he awoke, blinking against the sterile glow of the ship, he found the Alarian had drifted further into the blank. And then the first anomaly appeared, a beacon, silent, dark, unblinking, not a distress signal, not a communications, something else, ancient, purposeful, and unmoving. Its energy signature was unlike anything cataloged. He stared, a chill running down his spine. The tales of humans leaving traps or markers in uncharted space flashed through his mind. Not traps for fleets, but for hearts. The humans did not want to be found. Yet they allowed themselves to be glimpsed. Dri'An's finger hovered over the command lever. "This is it," he whispered to himself. "The point where the map ends and legend begins." The Alarian surged forward, crossing the invisible line. Time stretched thin. The ship's systems shuddered. Sensors flickered, lights dimmed, and the whispers became almost audible words. His heart hammered. Then, as if space itself had exhaled, the beacon pulsed. One single signal shot across the void, a message not meant for him, yet unmistakably human in its cadence. Dri'An's eyes widened. This is why they feared the blank zone. He leaned closer to the console, breath fogging the cold glass of the observation deck. The coordinates blinked back at him. The implications were staggering. He was alone, without backup, in the realm that countless fleets had avoided, and yet he felt the subtle presence of something larger than the galaxy itself. Not a god in form, but an intelligence threading meaning into chaos. He whispered, almost involuntarily, "Not luck. Someone wanted me to see this." The ship hummed again, steadying itself. The whispers ceased. For a moment, only the cold vastness of the void remained. And then, deep in the distance, a pattern of lights began to emerge like constellations, moving deliberately, aligning, breathing. Dri'An's breath caught. They're watching him. Or perhaps waiting. He steadied his hands. Every instinct screamed retreat, yet every spark of obsession urged him forward. Somewhere in the dark, he realized, the humans were alive. Not myths, not echoes, a live and unyielding dot. And in the final moment, before he dared step into the true unknown, the Alarian's mainframe recorded one last line from Dri'An, written in trembling awe. "They're still here." And somewhere, far beyond, the void pulsed back, live, patient, and merciless. The Alarian drifted through the edges of human space like a nervous predator stepping into an unseen trap. Dri'An's eyes, bloodshot from hours of staring at uncharted sensors, darted across the console. Every reading screamed anomaly. The blank zone was no void. It was a living puzzle, a labyrinth constructed by a species whose genius was equally terrifying and elegant. He adjusted the sensors to filter the ambient noise, but the signals persisted. They weren't random, not at all. Pulses, irregular but deliberate, threaded through the void in patterns that suggested intelligence beyond his comprehension. Vex, the ship's AI, registered the signals as non-classical energy anomalies. A bureaucratic euphemism for "we have no idea what this is." Vex, Dri'An said. Voice, tight with cautious excitement, traced the signal's origin. Every fluctuation, every pulse. Map it like a star. The AI's holographic eyes narrowed. Impossible. The energy signatures are layered, multidimensional. No conventional mapping technique will suffice. It is. Adaptive. Dri'An smiled grimly. Perfect. The humans had left this space like a living riddle. Nothing straightforward. No fleet formations. No obvious defenses. Just signals that teased, enticed, and warned all at once. Hours passed as he followed the patterns. His hands moved almost of their own volition, tracing imaginary lines in the air. The whispers returned, now stronger, interwoven with faint static, like a million voices trying to speak simultaneously. They weren't malevolent, they were curious, probing. And yet, the tension in the air was palpable. A sudden shudder ran through the ship. The Alarian's shields flickered. Dri'An's stomach tightened. He activated the external cameras. Nothing. Stars and darkness, stretching infinitely. But the sense of being observed had grown into a physical pressure. "Vex," he said, teeth clenched. "Have we triggered something?" "Negative," the AI replied cautiously. "Sensors detect no conventional attack. However, there is a coordinated response pattern in the energy signatures. Someone or something is aware of our presence." Dri'An's pulse quickened. He leaned closer to the holographic map, tracing the flux of signals. A region of black opened ahead, deeper than the rest. Within it, he detected the faint outline of a planet. Its surface was obscured, not by clouds or atmosphere, but by some kind of deliberate shroud. A subtle distortion bent light around it, as though reality itself hesitated at the edge. They hide everything, not for defense, but for testing. The ship drifted closer. Every instinct screamed caution, but obsession overrode fear. He wanted to see, to chart, to understand. As Alarian's hull pierced the outer fringe of the shrouded planet, the sensors went haywire. Star maps scrambled. Engine diagnostics flickered. The ship's lights dimmed, and for a moment, Dri'An felt weightless, as though the universe itself had paused. Then came the voice. It wasn't overcomes. It wasn't mechanical. It was a sound that hummed through his bones, deep, resonant, almost human, but not quite. Words formed in a language he did not know, yet the meaning was unmistakable. "Intruder," observed .dri, single quotes, and froze. His hands hovered over the controls, heart hammering. "Vex, translate." "Anything?" The AI flickered, struggling, unable. "Linguistic structure, unknown. Probability suggests human origin." Humans. The word settled over him like fire. He had read the legends. Humans so advanced in cunning and subtlety that their technology seemed magical to outsiders. But to hear it feel it was something else entirely. The planet beneath him shifted in perception. What had appeared static now seemed fluid. Vast cities emerged in the sensor overlays, rising and dissolving like mirages. The humans were here, hiding in plain sight, folding reality itself around their presence. Dri'An's stomach twisted. Every cautionary tale, every fearful log, every fleet disappearance flashed through his mind. They don't just survive, they manipulate the very perception of space to remain unseen. A sudden jolt knocked him off balance. The ship's external cameras recorded a wave of motion across the planet's surface. Humans moving, but so fast and coordinated, it resembled liquid more than flesh. Shadows bent at impossible angles. Structures folded and unfolded in an intricate choreography of intelligence. Dri'An whispered to himself, not just survivors, architects of the void. This time in his own mind. Not mechanical, not digital, direct, patterns, thoughts, fragments of logic. He could almost discern emotion, curiosity, assessment, a faint, teasing amusement. Humans were aware. They were watching, waiting, judging him by a standard no one else could understand. He felt the weight of centuries of human defiance pressing against him. They had endured wars that fractured galaxies. They had survived alien invasions, pandemics, and civil collapses. Yet here, in the uncharted void, they remained unbroken. not by weapons, not by fleets, but by mind, will, tenacity, and unyielding creativity. A faint flicker on the sensors caught his attention. A beacon different from the first emitted from the surface. Unlike the chaotic energy around it, this pulse was singular, rhythmic. It beckoned. Dri'An knew instinctively it was not a trap. Or maybe it was, but it was also an invitation. Only humans could craft a signal so dangerous and so alluring it would make even a cartographer ignore survival instincts. He steadied his hands. Every fiber of his body screamed to retreat, to turn the ship around and flee into the relative safety of mapped space. And yet, the beacon called to something deeper. Not curiosity, not obsession. A recognition of kinship in defiance of understanding in risk. Dri'An activated the landing protocols. The Alarian descended toward the planet, piercing the subtle distortions of reality that cloaked it. Every system shuddered, every sensor screamed, and yet, somehow, the ship remained whole. As it broke through the last layer of the veil, the surface unfolded beneath him, a vast city of impossible architecture. Towers bent like glass in windless storms. Streets wound in fractal patterns, and above it, humans moved with calculated grace, aware but not hostile. And then he saw them, a group of humans, small figures against the enormity of the cityscape, stared upward, not with fear, not with weapons raised, but with assessment, intelligence, and something else, a faint glimmer of acknowledgement. One of them raised an arm in a subtle gesture, almost imperceptible, yet Dri'An felt its weight in his chest. They know I am here. A quiet, almost reverent thought settled in his mind. Not luck. Someone wanted me to see this. The ship's engines hummed as it lowered further. For the first time, Dri'An felt a flicker of genuine fear, not of destruction, but of understanding. These humans were not to be conquered. They were to be witnessed. And he, the cartographer, was about to cross the threshold into a world that defied maps, logic, and legend alike. Then, as the Alarian touched down, the beacon pulsed once, sharply, and the whispers ceased. Silence descended, expectant and alive. Dri'An took a deep breath, gripping the console, his voice barely a whisper. I'm here. And somewhere in the city, the humans shifted, watching, waiting, calculating. The hatch hissed open. Dri'An's boots touched the ground, and the texture beneath him was unlike anything he had ever felt. A strange blend of organic resilience and artificial precision, as if the city itself was alive, breathing under his feet. The air, surprisingly breathable for an alien environment, carried a faint centerthy, metallic, and undeniably human. He inhaled cautiously, his chest tightened. This is no ordinary world. This is a testament. Before him, the humans awaited. Not a fleet, not a garrison, not warriors poised to strike. Just individuals, ordinary in silhouette, extraordinary in presence. Eyes sharp, posture confident but relaxed. They moved with a rhythm that suggested awareness of every molecule in the air and every vibration in the ground. It was unsettling and inspiring. Dri'An's first instinct was to reach for the comms, to send the standard greeting, to assert diplomacy, but hesitation rooted him to the spot. He could feel the weight of their scrutiny pressing against him, not with hostility, but with calculated curiosity. These humans did not merely see, they understood. And understanding carried power. The figure nearest him, a woman, tall, with eyes that seemed to pierce through layered realities, stepped forward. Her uniform, if it could be called that, was functional yet elegant, each fold and seam precisely placed. Her voice, when she spoke, carried across the open space without amplification. Direct and steady. "You are far from home," she said. Simple words, yet weighted with meaning, not accusation. Sacked. Dri'An swallowed hard. I am a cartographer," he replied, voice trembling slightly. I map what others cannot. His words faltered under the intensity of her gaze. I mean no harm. She tilted her head slightly, and he noticed a flicker of something almost humanly familiar in her expression. Curiosity, yes, but tempered with caution. Most do not arrive here willingly, she said. Okay. And few survive the journey without losing themselves to fear or obsession. Dri'an's pause quickened. He had read about humans who thrived in impossibility, who endured horrors no one else could imagine. But to witness it firsthand alive, breathing, watching him with deliberate patience was disorienting. He felt small, exposed, yet undeniably alive. You've seen the beacon, she continued, eyes sweeping over him like a tide of silent questions. It does not call lightly, it chooses carefully. And you, it chose you. Dri'an's stomach tightened. Chose me. The words echoed inside his head, mingling with the whispers of the blank zone that had haunted his ship. The humans did not need to fight. Their very existence was a statement. Their signals, their cities, the way reality bent around them, it was all a challenge. A puzzle, a test of perception and will. I don't understand, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Why? Why hide? Why not join the galaxy? The human's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. We do not hide because we fear, she said. We hide because the galaxy is not ready, and some truths must remain unseen until they are ready to witness them. The words struck him. It's not a threat, not a boast. It's a simple, unwavering principle. These humans had survived, not by superiority of arms, but by ingenuity, discipline, and patience. Their cunning was woven into the very fabric of the blank zone, a living, key, breathing labyrinth that protected them without need for walls or weapons. Dri'an's fingers itched for the scanner, for the data, for the maps that had defined his life. But standing here, beneath the subtle shimmer of their city, he realized something fundamental. This place could not be charted in coordinates and numbers alone. It required understanding, observation, respect. A shift in the shadows caught his eye. Other humans had emerged, not in unison, but in seamless, unnoticeable waves. They surrounded him in silence, their presence palpable, almost hypnotic. Movement suggested purpose, discipline, and a quiet humor. The way they observed him was not menacing, but deeply, profoundly assessing. One of them, a younger human, with hair the color of burning metal and eyes too old for his age, stepped forward and handed Dri'an a small device. It pulsed gently, resonating with his ship's signals. If you are truly here to learn, it will guide you, he said simply. If not, it will not matter. Dri'an held it, feeling the hum of latent energy. His mind raced. He had crossed boundaries no explorer had dared survive the blank zone, and yet now the true trial began not against weapons, fleets, or alien intelligence, but against the humans themselves. Their ingenuity was subtle, their defenses invisible, victories unrecorded. And here he was, an intruder, hoping to understand a species that had survived the impossible. He glanced at the city again. The architecture twisted impossibly, roads folding over themselves, towers leaning at angles that defied gravity, yet felt balanced, organic. Every detail spoke of a civilization that had mastered the art of living, of bending reality without breaking it, of thriving where others feared to tread. The woman who had first spoken to him nodded toward the device in his hand. Follow. But remember, fear is the greatest deterrent. Do not underestimate what you see or what you cannot. Dri'an's heart pounded. The first real test had begun. Every instinct screamed caution. Every spark of obsession screamed forward. He took a step, then another, and somewhere in the shadows, humans observed, unblinking, unyielding. Their patience infinite, their curiosity precise. The whispers returned, faint, resonant, now interwoven with the rhythm of the city itself. They were not malicious. They were guiding, teasing, warning. And Dri'An realized that he had entered a world that would not be conquered, would only be understood, survived. A sudden shimmer on the horizon caught his attention. Light folded, then bent. The city's surface seemed to ripple, almost like water disturbed by a stone. And through that ripple, he glimpsed something that froze his blood. Not a weapon, not a fleet, not a trap. A human figure, taller than the rest, standing alone atop a tower that seemed impossible in structure. Its presence radiated authority, confidence, and something beyond comprehension, intelligence that felt as vast as the galaxy itself. And Dri'An understood. This was the pinnacle of human cunning. Not a leader in the conventional sense, not a god, but an embodiment of the will, creativity, and indomitable spirit of an entire species. The figure raised a hand, just a subtle gesture. Yet in it, Dri'An felt an invitation, a warning, and a promise all at once. Welcome to the heart of human ingenuity. Welcome to the impossible. Dri'An's boots clicked against the undulating surface of the city. At first, the sound seemed normal, but then he realized it didn't echo. The ground absorbed it, bending reality subtly around each step, like the city itself was alive and listening. Every movement was amplified in perception, yet muted in sound. He looked down, feeling the shift beneath him, as though the city were aware of his weight. His hesitation, his intent, the device the young human had given him pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat in his hand. The rhythm was deliberate, almost sentient. It guided him through streets that looped impossibly, paths folding back on themselves, towers leaning at angles that would collapse under any conventional physics. Yet here, everything was stable, fluid, organic. The architecture itself was a lesson in balance, engineered with precision, yet infused with life. You feel it too, the young human said, walking beside him, voice calm, almost melodic. The city isn't just built. It thinks. It learns. Every choice, every movement, every hesitation is noted. Dri'An swallowed, suddenly aware of how exposed he was. Not physically, but intellectually. Every instinct he had honed for exploration, for charting the void, now seemed laughably inadequate. The humans had survived by turning the universe itself into a puzzle, and only those who could perceive the patterns, not just measure them, could navigate safely. And I am the intruder. A corner turned, and the city shifted subtly. Light bent, shadows stretched and compressed, and the street before him seemed to lengthen. It was disorienting, and Dri'An instinctively adjusted his balance, his eyes scanning for fixed points. But there were none, only the device pulsing softly, a guide in a landscape that refused maps. "Why don't you attack?" he asked, voice low. "You could." The young human raised a hand. "Attack. We don't need to. Fear is the greatest deterrent. We survive by design, not by aggression. Those who would conquer, those who would map us, they leave long before confrontation becomes necessary." Dri'An's chest tightened. He thought of the fleets that had vanished, the reports of explorers who never returned, the countless logs that ended in terrified whispers. They're still here. It wasn't just myth. It was method. The humans had mastered subtlety, patience, and psychological mastery to such a degree that no outsider could ever approach without unraveling. They approached a plaza, vast and open despite the apparent chaos of the city. Buildings spiraled upward, their forms both impossible and elegant. And at the center, a pool of black reflective liquid rippled without wind or motion. Above it, sunlight tore what passed for it, here broke into fragmented beams, casting dancing prisms across the cityscape. "This," the young human said, "is the heart of the city. Not just a place, but a test. The reflection shows more than the surface. It shows intent, perception, even fear. Dri'An stared at the pool. His own reflection shimmered and split, multiplying, warping. For a fleeting moment, he saw not himself, but every choice, every hesitation, every obsessive line of mapping he had ever drawn. He shivered. The humans did not just survive, they exposed weaknesses in any who dared approach. Not through force, but through perception. He noticed movement in the shadows at the plaza's edge. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but coordinated. The humans didn't need weapons. Their intelligence and ingenuity were weapon enough. Every motion was a statement. We are here. We are prepared. And we are beyond the comprehension of those who follow only instinct. The young human turned to him. You will be tested. Not in combat. Not in subjugation. But in understanding. Comprehension is the threshold here. Most fail without even realizing it. And failure is permanent. Dri'An's throat tightened. He had survived the void, the anomalies, the whispers, but now the real challenge began. It wasn't about maps or stars. It was about understanding the humans themselves, their willpower, their creativity, their subtle genius. A sudden ripple ran through the plaza. The reflective pool shifted, showing him scenes fleeting, fragmented of humans in ways no outsider had ever seen. A city rebuilt overnight with impossible efficiency. Children constructing intricate devices that manipulated gravity. Warriors coordinating complex strategies without words. Scientists folding reality with innovation alone. Every scene was both ordinary and extraordinary. Dri'An's mind reeled. This is what they've been hiding. Not just their presence, but their capability, their ingenuity, their HFY essence in its purest form. Humans weren't gods. They weren't invincible, but they were relentless, creative, and cunning beyond measure. The young human gestured to the pool. Step forward. Let it show you what you must see, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to understand. Only understanding grants passage. Dri'An hesitated. His instincts screamed caution. His obsession screamed forward. Every cell in his body thrummed with tension, anticipation, and awe. He had survived the edge of the known galaxy, witnessed signals no one else could decipher, and faced the ghosts of fleets lost to legend. Yet this was something entirely different. He stepped forward. The pool's surface rippled under his feet, reflecting not just him, but the void of his own fears, doubts, and limitations. And then, beneath the surface, he saw the humans not as legends, not as myths, not even as figures, but as living proof of what a species could achieve when unbroken by fear, driven by will, and guided by ingenuity. A low hum filled the plaza, not mechanical, not natural, almost musical, resonating deep within him. It carried a single, undeniable message: comprehend or be left behind. Dri'An's pulse raced. He realized that survival was no longer enough. Here, understanding was everything. And understanding meant confronting his own assumptions, his own obsession, and the full brilliance of humanity. The city shifted again, almost imperceptibly, and Dri'An understood he had entered the labyrinth. And the labyrinth was alive, somewhere. In the subtle bends of impossible architecture, the humans watched, waiting, patient, calculating, and utterly unyielding. Dri'An swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed caution. Every spark of human curiosity within him screamed to proceed. He took another step, and the city seemed to pulse in response. The first real test had begun. The plaza around him was silent, yet Dri'An felt the weight of countless unseen eyes. Every shadow, every reflection, every impossible curve of the city seemed alive with awareness. The pool of black liquid at the center shimmered, rippling like a heartbeat. And Dri'An realized with a jolt that it wasn't merely reflecting his movements. Sid was anticipating them. Step closer. The young human said softly. Do not rush. Let the city guide you. Ryan's mind raced. Every instinct screamed caution, but he knew hesitation could be fatal. The blank zone had tested his ship, his sensors, even his nerves. But this was something else. This was not about technology, not about strength. It was about understanding, perception, and subtlety. He moved forward, each step deliberate, feeling the liquid beneath him ripple with a strange, tactile feedback. The reflections shifted. Faces, structures, impossible geometries flickered in and out of view, teasing comprehension. One moment, the pool showed him his own face, lined with obsession and fear. The next, it revealed fleets lost to legend, drifting silently in the void, their crews frozen in moments of panic, whispers echoing, "They're still here." Dri'An's pulse quickened. It's showing me history, memory, warnings. Do you see it? The young human asked. Do you understand what is required? Dri'An swallowed, trying to steady his racing thoughts. I think. You want me to? Perceive, not just observe. The human nodded. Exactly. Observation alone is survival. Perception is understanding. And understanding is the threshold. Most fail here. The city shifted subtly around him. Paths that had been straight, now twisted. Towers that had seemed stable, now leaned impossibly. Shadows stretched and condensed, forming shapes that could have been human or illusions. The device pulsed in his hand, guiding him, but not controlling him. Every choice, every hesitation was noted. Every flicker of fear registered. Dri'An realized with the start that the test was not of intellect alone. It was of self, of fear, obsession, and the limits he had placed on himself. He could calculate trajectories, chart stars, and navigate anomalies. But here, in the heart of human ingenuity, survival demanded emotional acuity, creativity, and intuition. He paused. The pool shimmered. For the briefest moment, he saw a human figure kneeling, hands folded, as if in prayer. The reflection was subtle, almost invisible, but it struck him like a blow. Humans, he realized, had endured the impossible, not just with skill, but with faith. Not faith in technology or fleets, but faith in something greater, something unseen, yet undeniably present. Dri'An swallowed hard. Not luck. Someone wanted me to see this. The thought was almost reverent, and for the first time, he felt a connection beyond comprehension. Something larger, subtler than himself was guiding him, not dictating, not controlling, but allowing him to test, to learn, to confront. The pool rippled again, and the city responded. Streets shifted, reflections warped, and shadows coalesced into shapes that seemed almost humanoid. A soft hum resonated in the plaza, low and melodic, vibrating in his chest. The humans watching from the edges of the city did not intervene. They were observers, guides, and arbiters of this test. You will make choices, the young human said. Some are obvious, some are not. Every action, every hesitation, every thought is part of the assessment. Fail, and you do not proceed. Succeed, and you may glimpse what humans have preserved in this void for millennia. Dri'An's hands clenched around the device. His mind raced through possibilities. He could attempt to map the city, record data, analyze signals, but that was irrelevant. The city demanded intuition, understanding, perception. He closed his eyes for a moment, drawing on every experience he had accumulated, every lesson from the void, every whispered warning. He let instinct guide him. He stepped forward again. The reflections shifted, forming patterns that suggested pathways, sequences, and choices. The city seemed to breathe around him, responding to his perceptions, adapting to his decisions. Each correct perception, each intuitive insight, made the paths ahead clearer, while missteps caused subtle distortions, forcing him to recalibrate, to think beyond the boundaries of logic. Hours or perhaps minutes, time had lost its meaning past. Dri'An moved with careful deliberation, sensing, perceiving, intuiting. The city responded, subtly aligning with his understanding, testing, teasing, shaping him into something more than a mere observer. At last, he reached the center of the plaza, where the pool shimmered most intensely. He gazed into its black depths, seeing fragments of human ingenuity, cities rising from ruins, fleets outmaneuvered without a single shot fired, civilizations preserved through wit and resilience rather than power. And at the center, a single truth crystallized. Humans endured because they refused to surrender to fear. They thrived because their willpower, empathy, and creativity were unmatched. Dri'An's chest tightened. He realized he had glimpsed not just survival, but mastery. And he understood why the galaxy feared the blank zone, why the map ended at human space. The humans were not merely alive, they were untouchable, invincible in ways no fleet or empire could ever comprehend. The young human stepped forward. You perceive? You understand? That is enough to proceed. But remember, perception is only the beginning. To survive here, you must also act with courage and faith. Nothing less will suffice. Dri'An's hands shook slightly as he nodded. I understand. The plaza pulsed with quiet energy, almost like approval. Shadows retreated, streets realigned, and the impossible geometry of the city settled into a form that he could navigate. The test had ended, but the journey, the true journey, was only beginning. He realized, with a mixture of awe and dread, that survival here demanded more than skill, more than courage. It demanded transformation, understanding the essence of humanity itself, and embracing the ingenuity, faith, and relentless spirit that had preserved them against all odds. The humans watched from the edges of the plaza, silent, patient, their assessment complete yet ongoing. Dri'An's pulse raced. He had passed the first test, but the blank zone held deeper trials, more subtle and dangerous. And he knew the next phase would challenge not only his mind, but his very perception of reality. The city hummed around him, live, aware, and patient. And somewhere in the shadows, the humans waited, unblinking and unyielding, as if the entire labyrinth exhaled in quiet anticipation. The city around Dri'An shifted subtly, a living labyrinth that responded to thought, intention, and emotion. Streets folded over themselves, towers leaned impossibly, and shadows stretched in patterns that defied reason. Every step he took sent ripples through the environment, as if the city itself were aware of his presence and analyzing his choices. The young human who had guided him paused at a junction. Beyond this point, he said, perception alone is not enough. You must act. Intelligence is required, but courage, creativity, and resilience are equally essential. Many fail here. Few ever return. Dri'An swallowed hard. He had survived the void, the blank zone, and the first test of perception. But now a new challenge loomed. His heart pounded, and a flicker of fear gnawed at the edges of his mind. This is what it means to confront humans in their world. Not with weapons, but with ingenuity beyond imagination. A corridor stretched before him, long and narrow, seemingly endless. The walls shimmered faintly, reflecting fragmented images of his past fleets he had mapped. Anomalies he had charted, explorers who had vanished into the void. Every image was distorted, warped, reminding him that the city did not simply observe, tested, judged, and revealed. Step forward, the young human said. And remember, fear is your enemy. It is the greatest deterrent. You cannot afford hesitation. Dri'An nodded, though his hands shook. He advanced cautiously, eyes scanning every reflection, every shimmer of light, every shadow. The corridor twisted unpredictably, forcing him to recalibrate constantly. It was disorienting, but he focused on the small device in his hand. Its pulse, steady and deliberate, offered guidance but no answers as he moved deeper. The corridor narrowed, the walls bending inward subtly. A low hum resonated, vibrating through the floor, the walls, and even the air around him. It was neither mechanical nor organic, something else entirely. Something deliberate. Something designed to challenge the mind as much as the body. Dri'An's breath quickened. The reflections along the walls began to shift, showing him not only his own face, but also the faces of the humans who had watched him from the plaza. Each expression was a study in observation, curiosity, and judgment. And beneath it all, he sensed something deeper, quiet, almost imperceptible intelligence guiding the tests. Then the first challenge appeared. The corridor widened suddenly, revealing a room bathed in flickering light. At its center floated a structure that defied all geometry. Cubes within cubes, twisted impossibly. Its planes intersected at angles that should have collapsed, and yet everything hovered perfectly in balance. Embedded in the structure were panels that glowed faintly with energy signatures, pulsing in rhythm with the city itself. "This is your trial," the young human said. "Not brute force, not weapons. The city will test your mind, your intuition, and your ability to act under pressure. Solve the puzzle, and you may proceed. Fail, and the city will correct your errors permanently." Dri'An approached, heart hammering. He studied the structure, trying to understand its patterns. Each panel responded to thought, touch, and subtle movement. He tried to predict the sequences, adjusting for rhythm, light, and spatial distortion, but nothing worked. The structure seemed alive, adaptive, responding to him rather than the other way around. A flicker of panic surged. "I'm trapped. I can't solve this." He closed his eyes for a moment, drawing on every lesson from the void, every insight gained from the first trial. He focused not on mapping, not on calculation, but on perception, intuition, and creativity. Slowly, a rhythm emerged. The panels pulsed in patterns that suggested sequence rather than randomness. Dri'An followed the flow, moving carefully, deliberately, responding to the energy rather than imposing his will. Each correct adjustment caused a faint resonance through the room, like the city acknowledging his understanding. Each mistake was subtle, corrected immediately by the structure, forcing him to rethink, adapt, and improvise. Hours or perhaps minutes. Time was impossible to measure past. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and every muscle ached from the tension. Yet he persisted, guided by intuition, creativity, and a strange sense of faith that he could not explain. Not luck. Someone wanted me to endure this. Finally, with one precise motion, the structure shifted. The impossible geometry stabilized, glowing panels aligning in perfect symmetry. The room exhaled a low, resonant hum that vibrated through Dri'An's chest. The corridor beyond opened, revealing a path lined with soft, pulsing light. "You have succeeded," the young human said quietly. "Not because you are the strongest or the fastest, but because you perceived, adapted, and acted. That is what humans have always relied upon: willpower, creativity, and faith in the face of the impossible." Dri'An's chest heaved. He had faced the blank zone, the city's labyrinthine perception, and now the first direct test of intellect and courage. He had emerged intact, but profoundly changed. The humans had not just tested him, they had revealed the depth of their brilliance. The corridor ahead pulsed gently, inviting him forward. Dri'An realized that each trial would become progressively more demanding, not of his tools, not of his sensors, but of his mind, heart, and understanding of human ingenuity. The city had more tests waiting, each designed to challenge the very limits of perception. Courage and faith. The young human gestured forward. "The path continues, and deeper trials await. Are you prepared to continue?" Dri'An straightened, gripping the device. "I am." The city exhaled again, and the walls shifted, forming a new corridor. Shadows lengthened, Light bent impossibly, and somewhere in the distance, the humans watched, patient and unyielding. Their assessment ongoing. The first trial had ended, but the blank zone was far from done. Dri'An stepped forward into the corridor that had opened after his first successful trial. The light shifted, bending and folding like liquid, creating a labyrinthine path that defied logic. The walls pulsed subtly, responding to his heartbeat, to the rhythm of his breath, even to the tiniest tremor in his hands. The city was alive, and it was watching. The young human who had guided him remained close, silent but vigilant. "This trial," he said softly, "is unlike the first. You will face shadows not of the city, but of yourself. Every fear, every hesitation, every doubt you have carried through the void will manifest. To survive, you must confront them, not avoid them." Dri'An swallowed hard. He had survived impossible navigation through the blank zone, outwitted perception-defying architecture, and endured a test of pure intuition. And yet, the notion of confronting himself, his own weaknesses, struck deeper than any anomaly or threat in the void. The corridor narrowed, and the walls darkened. Shadows coalesced into forms that were vaguely human, but distorted, twisted, and shifting. At first, they seemed innocuous mere illusions, but then he realized they mirrored not his movements, but his thoughts. Hesitation, fear, obsessional had taken shape. The shadows whispered, not in words, but in a resonant vibration that pressed against his chest and rattled his mind. "You are not worthy. You will fail. Turn back." Dri'An's pulse quickened. He clenched the device in his hand, trying to ground himself. "I am not afraid," he said aloud, though his voice trembled. "I will not fail." The shadows reacted instantly, coiling around him, forming impossible angles, stretching across the corridor in serpentine patterns. The light bent to enhance their presence, turning every reflection, every shimmer, into another form of him, exaggeration of every flaw he had ever felt. Fear, hesitation, obsession, weakness. A figure stepped forward from the darkness, not fully shadow, but not fully human either. It was him, older, broken eyes, hollowed by despair. The figure mirrored every failure he had ever suffered, every expedition that had ended in disaster. Every time he had doubted himself or let obsession override reason. Dri'An's stomach tightened. He knew he could flee, retreat into logic and observation, but that would be failure. Survival here demanded more. He had to act, not react. He focused on his breathing, counting each pulse, each step. He thought of the humans he had seen, the ones in the plaza, the ones orchestrating impossible structures, the ones whose ingenuity and willpower had preserved entire civilizations. If they can endure the impossible, so can I. He stepped forward. The shadow mirror moved with him, matching, mocking, challenging. Yet, with each step, Dri'An altered his perception, not the shadow, but himself. He refused to see it as an enemy. He refused to cower. He acknowledged it. "This is me, all of me, weakness, fear, doubt, obsession, and still I endure." The corridor pulsed. The shadows wavered, recoiling slightly. Dri'An advanced further, focusing not on defeating them, but on integrating the fear, understanding it, mastering it. He realized that the trial was not combat, but comprehension. He had to accept that fear existed, that doubt existed, and that obsession could be a tool rather than a chain. The distorted mirror figure lunged forward, silent but palpable, pressing into his mind, forcing him to confront every failure and misstep. Dri'An met it not with aggression, but with recognition. "You are part of me," he whispered. "I will not deny you. I will not let you stop me. I will survive." Resonance spread through the corridor. The shadows writhed, then collapsed, folding into the walls as if absorbed. The light returned to a steady pulse. The corridor straightened, no longer torturous, no longer hostile. Dri'An felt a deep exhale, not his own, but the city's, as though it had been holding its breath. Testing his courage and resilience, the young human stepped beside him. "You have faced yourself," he said quietly. "Few can endure that without breaking. You have done more than survive, you have understood. That is the measure of your spirit." Dri'An's chest heaved. Sweat and adrenaline mingled, but he felt a strange clarity, a sense of inner alignment he had never experienced. The shadows had not disappeared. They had been integrated, tamed, acknowledged. He understood now. The city tested not just perception, not just intellect, but character. And his character had endured. Ahead, the corridor opened into a vast chamber. Towers rose impossibly. Lights shimmered in fractal patterns, and in the center, a pool of black reflective liquid mirrored not only his image, but fragments of the city itself. For a moment, he glimpsed something extraordinary, a human figure at the center, larger and more imposing than any he had seen before, radiating authority, intelligence, and the quiet confidence of a species that had mastered survival itself. Dri'An's pulse quickened. He had passed the trial of perception, the trial of courage, and the trial of self, but the city hinted that the next test would not only challenge his mind and spirit, but his very essence. He realized that survival here demanded constant adaptation, constant awareness, and an understanding that humans thrived not on force, but on subtlety, creativity, and faith. They had endured the impossible for millennia not because of weapons, not because of fleets, but because they understood fear, embraced ingenuity, and acted with courage beyond measure. The young human gestured forward. "The next trial awaits. It will demand all you have learned and more. Are you ready to continue?" Dri'An nodded, gripping the device tightly. "I am ready." The city pulsed, and a new corridor unfolded. Shadows shifted, light bent, and somewhere in the distance, the humans watched, patient, unyielding, and utterly aware. He had survived the trial of shadows, but the blank zone still held secrets more profound, more dangerous, and more wondrous than he could yet imagine. The corridor ahead was unlike anything Dri'An had seen. The walls shimmered with impossible light, bending perspectives, folding space in subtle arcs that defied comprehension. It wasn't just a path, it was a test, a living enigma. The air seemed thicker, resonating with energy that pulsed in rhythm with the device in his hand, as if the city itself were breathing. "You have done well," the young human said quietly, walking beside him. "But this is the final trial. Not perception, not courage, not self. All of those are prerequisites. This is ingenuity, creativity, and faith. Everything you are will be tested." Dri'An swallowed hard. His chest ached from exertion. His mind reeled from the previous trials. He had faced the impossible, confronted shadows of himself, and survived the city's living tests, but now the stakes felt immeasurably higher. He realized with a jolt that beyond this point, failure would not only halt his journey, it could erase him entirely from this space, leaving him lost in the blank zone forever. The corridor widened, revealing a vast chamber at its center. Suspended in the void was a structure that defied logic. Towers spiraled impossibly, walls intersected at angles that should have collapsed, and floors hovered in layers with no support. At its core was a sphere of black liquid, rippling and reflecting light in ways that seemed to twist reality itself. "This is the heart," the young human said. "Every human in this city, every structure, every pattern you have encountered, it all converges here. To pass, you must interact with it, not as a visitor, not as an observer, but as a participant in its logic. You must understand the human's way of thinking, their resilience, their faith, and act in harmony with it." Dri'An stepped closer. The sphere pulsed, resonating deep in his chest. When he reached out, he saw not just his reflection, but countless moments from human history. Battles endured, cities rebuilt, civilizations preserved against impossible odds. Each image was a lesson in ingenuity, courage, and faith. He realized the test was more than manipulation or analysis. He had to think like a human, anticipate, adapt, and create solutions that even he could not fully predict. Failure would not be punished with death alone. It would be punished with disappearance. Erased from this living city, a cautionary tale for those who followed. The sphere began to pulse faster, sending ripples through the floating structure. The layers of the chamber shifted. Towers spun, floors rotated, and pathways dissolved before him. Dri'An had to move carefully, balancing instinct, perception, and creativity. One misstep could trap him in a recursive loop, lost in the labyrinth forever. He focused. He remembered the humans he had observed. Not perfect, not invincible, but relentless. They endured because they understood risk, adapted to chaos, and maintained faith when reason failed. Dri'An closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. Not luck. Someone wanted me to reach this. He opened his eyes and moved with deliberate confidence. Each step, each adjustment, synchronized with the pulsing of the sphere. Shadows no longer threatened him. They guided him. Reflections showed not fear, but possibility. The city responded to his choices, not as obstacles, but as a conversation. Hours or, perhaps, moments. Time had lost all meaning past as he navigated the impossible. The sphere's surface rippled, coalescing into shapes that demanded his action. Panels, levers, and subtle holographic interfaces appeared, challenging him to rearrange sequences, predict patterns, and improvise solutions. His mind raced. Every instinct honed in the void. Every observation, every leap of intuition was necessary. And then came the moment of truth. The sphere pulsed intensely, and the floating structures aligned into a coherent configuration. The black liquid shimmered, and Dri'An glimpsed a human figure standing at the center tile, imposing, radiating intelligence and authority. Its eyes met his, and in them he felt the weight of millennia, ingenuity preserved, courage tested, and faith maintained. The figure raised a hand, and the sphere rippled outward in concentric waves. The chamber stabilized. The pathways aligned perfectly. The towers rested, and the floating floors solidified into a coherent structure. Dri'An realized he had succeeded not because he solved a puzzle, but because he had understood, acted with courage, and trusted intuition, guided by faith. The young human stepped beside him. Few outsiders survive this trial, he said. Even fewer understand what they have witnessed. You have done both. The city acknowledges your ingenuity, courage, and spirit. You may proceed to the final chamber, where the humans will reveal themselves fully. Dri'An's chest heaved. He had faced perception, courage, shadows, and now the ultimate trial of ingenuity. He understood in that moment why the galaxy feared human space, why the maps ended at the blank zone. Humans had endured the impossible, not through technology alone, not through fleets or weapons, but through willpower, creativity, and subtle mastery of their environment. The chamber ahead shimmered, and the floating structures rearranged, forming a single path toward the center. The sphere pulsed one final time, and Dri'An felt a deep resonance, almost divine, almost divine. Not luck. Someone wanted me to witness this. Someone wanted me to endure. He stepped forward. The city exhaled. Shadows receded. Light bent naturally. And somewhere in the edges of perception, the humans watched, patient, unyielding, and utterly aware. The final chamber awaited. The humans would no longer be distant observers or abstract presences. They would confront him directly, revealing the full measure of their ingenuity, resilience, and spirit. Dri'An understood, with a mixture of fear and awe, that what he was about to witness would forever change his understanding of humanity and, perhaps, the galaxy itself. The chamber unfolded before Dri'An like a vision of impossible geometry brought to life. Towers rose at angles that should have toppled. Streets floated in suspended arcs, and reflections of the black sphere shimmered in every surface. Yet everything was harmonious, perfectly balanced, almost alive. Every detail whispered a story of ingenuity, resilience, and centuries of careful preservation. And then he saw them not in shadows, not as echoes or reflections, but fully humans. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, moving seamlessly through the impossible architecture. They were not uniform, not soldiers of a single command. They were engineers, scientists, artists, children, and thinkers. Each action precise, purposeful, yet fluid with creativity. Eyes sharp, hands deft, minds alive in ways that defied logic. Dri'An's chest tightened. He had read reports of humans surviving fleets, evading empires, manipulating perception and physics to their advantage, but to witness it firsthand was overwhelming. Every instinct screamed caution. Every instinct of a cartographer long accustomed to mapping the void faltered under the realization that the humans themselves were the greatest unknown. One figure stepped forward, taller than the rest, radiating an aura of authority without arrogance. Its gaze met Dri'An's, and in that look, he felt millennia of ingenuity, courage, and faith compressed into a single presence. The figure did not speak immediately, yet Dri'An felt communication nonetheless, not through words, but through a quiet, undeniable understanding. This is why the maps end here. This is why no explorer returns with coordinates. The figure extended a hand, and, for the first time, Dri'An noticed the subtle signs of their civilization's ethos: tools interwoven with biology, structures alive with adaptive intelligence, in an environment tuned to challenge and cultivate perception, creativity, and courage. Humans have survived not by domination, but by mastering the impossible through mind, will, and spirit. You have come far, the figure said, finally, voice resonant but calm, each word carrying weight without coercion. Few outsiders survive the trials of our space. Fewer still understand why they exist. Dri'An nodded, words failing him. He had crossed the blank zone, survived trials of perception, courage, and ingenuity, confronted shadows of himself, and endured tests that bent reality. And now, here, he was faced with the humans themselves, the living embodiment of resilience, creativity, and relentless spirit. They are still here, he whispered, remembering the final message his ship had sent before disappearing. I see why. The tall human smiled faintly, not in mockery, but in acknowledgement. We endure because we must, because fear can never dictate our existence, because the universe is vast, chaotic, and indifferent. We are the measure of what perseverance, creativity, and faith can accomplish when left unchecked by fear. Dri'An felt the shiver run through him. He realized the truth that no map, no fleet, no explorer could ever convey. Humans were not merely survivors. They were architects of possibility, masters of perception, and keepers of ingenuity beyond reckoning. He looked around at the humans moving through the chamber, each performing tasks both ordinary and extraordinary. Engineers bending space with subtle adjustments, scientists testing gravity and light, children manipulating devices that reshaped perception. The city itself was an extension of their will, adaptive and alive, reflecting their intelligence and creativity. And yet, amid the awe, Dri'An noticed something else: a quiet reverence, a subtle faith. Humans had endured catastrophe, war, and the indifference of the galaxy. And still, somewhere beyond the rationale, they believed not in luck, not in chance, but in the unseen order that allowed ingenuity, courage, and creativity to flourish. Dri'An's hand touched the sphere at the center. Ripples spread outward, reflecting the city, the humans, and him. He understood in that moment the reason the galaxy feared human space. It was not weapons, fleets, or technology that made them untouchable. It was willpower, empathy, ingenuity, and the ability to endure the impossible with unyielding courage. "They're still here," he said again, this time not as a report, but as a revelation. "And no one can conquer them, not with fleets, not with fear, not with logic alone." The tall human's gaze softened. "Some voids are left blank for mercy's sake," they said. "Not all truths are meant to be charted. Not all power is meant to be challenged. You came seeking maps, knowledge, control, but what you found is something far older, far deeper, the measure of humanity." Dri'An exhaled slowly, the enormity of it pressing against his chest. He realized he had crossed boundaries no one else dared, survived trials no one else could endure, and glimpsed the heart of a species that had endured the impossible. Yet he also understood the unspoken law of this space. Some knowledge is not given lightly. Respect, understanding, and humility were required to even witness it. A subtle ripple of energy passed through the chamber, almost like a quiet blessing. Not from technology, not from the city, but from the unseen, the guiding intelligence that had preserved humans, allowed them to endure, and now allowed Dri'An to witness it. He felt it as certainty, as intuition, as a quiet confirmation. Not luck, not chance, not accident. Someone or something had wanted him to survive and learn. The humans began to move around him. Not in menace, not in aggression, but in acknowledgement. They were alive, present, and utterly untouchable. They did not need to fight. Their existence alone was the statement, the warning, the promise. Dri'An realized the galaxy's maps would forever end here, not because of borders, fleets, or wars, but because the humans had become something beyond conventional understanding. They were living proof that fear is the greatest deterrent, and willpower, creativity, and faith are the truest measures of power. He took a deep breath, understanding, for the first time, what it meant to confront the essence of humanity. Not the stories, not the legends, not the whispered warnings, but the reality. Untouchable, indomitable, endlessly inventive, and somewhere, in the silent observation of the humans, Dri'An felt it, the subtle presence of the unseen, guiding, protecting, allowing the extraordinary to endure. The city pulsed softly, the sphere rippled, and the humans exhaled as if the entire labyrinth itself recognized his presence. Dri'An looked up, and, with quiet awe, whispered one final truth to himself. They're still here, and somewhere beyond the void. The galaxy would never forget the warning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the edge of the galaxy. See you next time.